Please welcome our next panel, Branding in the Digital Age, featuring moderator Dana Cowin and panelists Krystle Mobayeni, Jen Pelka, Melanie Dunea, and Erik Bruner-Yang.
I'm Dana Cowin. I have this incredible panel. I'm sure you know some of the amazing people on it already, but for the sake of introductions, what I'm going to do is have each person talk a little bit about themselves and their vision of branding in the digital age. Because as Jen Pelka said, you say brand and people hear and think very different things. So just so that we know what we're talking about when we talk about brand, what it means to each of you, and we can go from there. So Krystle, why don't you just hop on?
Great. My name is Krystle Mobayeni. I'm the co-founder and CEO of BentoBox, and it's a platform for restaurants to help them own their online presence. We help restaurants connect with their guests and own their profits online, primarily starting with their website. And so for me answering this question, it's sort of two parts. One is, how do we help restaurants represent their brand in a digital age where there's so many different third parties and apps trying to take a piece of their guest relationship, their brand, the message that they're trying to create, the experience that they create in that brick and mortar, and how do they translate that online through their little piece of the internet, which they own, which is their website. So there's that. And then the other part is our own brand, our BentoBox brand. And how do we as a technology company make sure that we're continuing to connect and resonate with the hospitality industry? What are the things that we've built into our culture and our mission and our values that help us create a brand that really resonates with the restaurant industry?
So you're really saying that you're a twofer.
Twofer.
You've got your own brand, and then you have all the restaurant brands. But do you want to just define what are the pillars of your own brand?
For BentoBox? Yeah, absolutely. So we have our mission. We start with our mission, which is empowering the world's restaurants to succeed in their mission of hospitality. And we do that through our vision, which is being the technology that elevates every interaction between the restaurant and the guest. And then under that, we have three main pillars that hold up our mission and vision, which are hospitality, taste, and bottom line. And then out of those three, we have then 9 principles, which I won't get into because will take a little bit. But but those 3 pillars are basically everything runs out of that.
But I think that in itself is sort of like a brand playbook, right? That you start with the mission, you go to the vision, you have the underlying, you call them principles.
We have our pillars.
Your pillars, you have the underlying.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is the way, a lens to which a lot of people brainstorm around defining their brand. So we can get into that later, but it's a great place to start.
Great.
Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Pelka. I'm the founder of the Riddler, which is a group of champagne bars. We have one in San Francisco, and we just opened our second location in October in the West Village.
Woo, woo!
Thanks, Dana. And I'm also launching a champagne brand in 2 weeks, so I'm excited about that.
Does that have anything to do with what's at your feet?
It might. So what I was going to say is a lot of what I think about is how you live the brand. And so obviously I brought some champagne with me for all of my fellow speakers. So I'll give you the little rundown. So the brand is called Une Femme. Here, pass it down. The brand is called Une Femme. It's all about women. So we have all female winemakers. And each of the wines is named after the woman who's making it. And here, I'll pass you some glasses. And a percentage of proceeds will benefit Dress for Success. But the reason why we're launching the brand is because it really is an extension of everything that we do at the Riddler, which our goal is to build the best champagne brands in the world. And with that, we want to do a lot of champagne education. We want to introduce people to really cool champagnes, different styles of winemaking. And also a big part of our brand is that all of our investors are women. And so it's a natural thing for us to do brand partnerships with female winemakers as well.
So, what do you think of Krystle's? Do you have that same?
We do. Ours is a little bit less formalized than at Bento, but we talked about this a lot. Krystle is actually one of our investors, which is so cool. It's something that we want to get a little bit more tight about. I mean, for us, we really want to build the best champagne bars in the world, and so that comes down to the people who are on our team, our training, the way that we work with our purveyors, and the way that we provide hospitality to our guests. But every day we're thinking about how we can formalize those things a bit more, especially as we grow.
Does it matter? I mean, because for Krystle, she feels like it matters for you. You've done an exceptional job at building a brand, apparently not as rigidly.
I think it helps. Yeah, I mean, I think it does matter. It's something that we think a lot about, but we haven't gone through the practice of hiring an agency to help us figure it out explicitly. And it's obviously an exercise we could do internally, and we do a lot of talking about these sorts of things within our team. But
do you feel like you need an agency?
I don't know that we need an agency. You used an agency, right?
No, we didn't.
Oh, you did it all your own.
We had a consultant help us, but I think to your point, I think waiting a couple of years and just letting the dust settle and really seeing where you're landing and where your place is and being able to communicate it is 100% okay and totally a good way to go about it.
Yeah, actually, I think that's actually really great advice for people who are trying to solidify their brand, right? Because you don't know, and actually, Erik, it'd be really interesting to hear you talk about this, but you don't always know what you built until your customer tells you or until later in the process. So you can have the best intentions of mission, brand, vision, and then it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have, gone so full force. Do you have any thoughts on that before we?
I'm definitely the representation of the anti-brand on the panel.
So, sorry, introduce yourself and then.
Sorry, yes, my name's Erik Bruner-Yang. I'm a restaurateur based out of Washington, D.C. My company is called Foreign National, and we have 4 very different restaurants in the DMV area.
And you're representing the anti-brand on the panel.
Well, we've had a couple of pre-conferences, and it's amazing to share these stages with these badass boss ladies here, and they just so intelligent. And I've been kind of spending the last kind of week to just figure out how I can express what we do, because I do think we have very strong brands, but our message is not communicated in any form or fashion, and I think ours is really about the organic experience, and then basically what the customer experience ends up translating what the brand ultimately becomes. So I think that's usually our style.
So you do have a brand because people will follow you, right? They find out that you're opening this restaurant and they're like, oh my God, Erik's behind that. I totally want to go, which means that you actually have a lot of brand equity, but you haven't done it the way these guys have, which is setting a mission, vision, except you inhabit it, right? So
Correct.
You represent an entire group of people who inhabit a vision, and what you say is the right thing for the brand, so-called, is right because it comes from you? Is that what you...
Yeah, it's very intuitive, and at this point we're 250 employees, and we don't have a mission statement, we don't have core brand values, but we've had employees work for us for over a decade, and the company itself is about that intuition of customer service to the guest, and customer service to us as employees. But it stems, from me and how we branch out from that. I don't think our company would exist without these other employees that have worked for us for so long and have embraced it. And then long term, I'm personally in that transition where, how does that become a vehicle for longevity? So as an entrepreneur, I've been in business for 8 years. As a chef, 19. But what's the next decade going to be? And it can't just be based on my gut anymore. Or it can. That's the question that needs to be answered by myself, I guess.
That's a very good question. What do you think it is from within you? If you asked either the customers or the people who work with you, because they have to live your values every day, because it's the company's values, how would they identify it, even if you wouldn't necessarily describe it that way yourself?
Besides them thinking I'm a maniac, I love restaurant work. and I love the restaurant, and I love what we create. Every restaurant is different, a different type of cuisine, a different representation of my style. We're in heavily gentrified areas, so they become very important fabrics of the communities that we're in. Originally, all my restaurants were within the same 3-4 block radius, so it was very much just about uplifting where I live and participating in that. And now that we've branched into other neighborhoods, trying to figure out what that means moving forward becomes harder and still evolving, I think. But I think people have a sense of ownership of our places. They're very passionate about them. And then there's people who love my restaurants who also hate other versions of my, they love one but not the other, and it's been interesting to see that happen, and I like that.
Okay, we need to, so many things to ask you. We'll get back to them though. I mean, community is a really interesting topic for everybody, what community means to you, and that there's different variations in that. And also, it's interesting to me that you have people who are really connected to your brand that hate parts of it, because you would think that if they buy into the concept, they'd buy into any one of the suite of them. So we'll get back to that. Melanie?
How did I get on this panel? I'm so excited. Hi, I'm Melanie Dunea. I think it's actual a professional victory to be on a panel about branding. I'm a photographer. I've done 6 books, but the ones you might know the best are called My Last Supper, which were 2 books celebrating chefs and the cultural movement that I saw. And that was when the restaurant and the hospitality business really welcomed me, much more than the celebrity and the other, which I am endlessly grateful for. My brand is me and my photographs. And really, it's my photographs and my storytelling, even though I'm going to use a lot of overused words now. But, I see my brand, if you call it, my job is to transfer information. That is it. So I hope that when you look at my work, and whether it's with my voice or whether, because I do tend to not just do photography, sometimes I do radio, TV, or weird performance art, and I hope that whatever I do at the moment tells the story best. So it's a bit of an eclectic brand, but I hope that every time you look at my work, you see, wow, that's that person, or you feel connected. And it's a unique experience, and we need to talk, because I need pillars and things. Because my gut, my intuition, my desire to get to the core of the story is what drives me. And there's so much, oh my God, there's money and booze on this stage. It's so exciting. Best panel ever, I told you. So, I strive and I struggle a lot because I don't have 250 employees. Right now, I have 0. And I struggle all the time with myself and how do I keep going, build the business, explain the business, share the business, and keep on track. So I have a lot of conversations in the mirror.
I mean, I think one of the things that we were talking about your brand is that if people think Melanie photographer, that is only one piece of it. And what are the levers that you can use, bad word, but to express yourself appropriately in all the different mediums and all the different yous, right? And those things are similar, because even though you're one person and you're one person but several businesses, there's the question of how do you represent yourself and in what mediums? So I feel like that's a good transition to talk about the ways in which we exist across the digital landscape as brands. And Krystle, I know that you have thoughts about the ways in which you are not the same. I mean, you're the same essence, but you're not the same across the landscape when you're building a brand. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, both for us and for our restaurants, really see the different channels and the different touch points between social media, your website, whether it's podcast, video, as things that should be complementary and not repetitive, and thinking about those different channels of how different parts of your brand can manifest itself.
Would you mind, just for the purpose of explication, to take a brand and just say, what is it? Like, what does it feel like? Like, what is the voice? Because you're going to start, like, no matter what, you're going to start with a voice and what the brand represents, right? Like, you have to have that core, but then the way in which it's represented across the different mediums, it's responsive. So, is there something that comes to mind, or is that too hard a question on the fly?
For ourselves?
Could be for yourself or for your...
Yeah. So, one way, so I'll try to think about... the way that we use Instagram, for example, is very different than the way that we use like blog content and video. The way we use Instagram is we're all about highlighting our customer base and our community and our chefs. The medium really lends itself to it. It's a really community-based type of medium, and we're all about the stories that restaurants have, and we find Instagram is a good place to tell that. And then our blog content and video is much more about education. Like, how can we help restaurants actually become smart marketers? How can we educate them on things like setting up their successful like online ordering program, or how to deal with ADA? And so those are things that we don't just take the same thing we did in Instagram and just translate it exactly to video or to our blog. We really think about the mediums and how they're consumed, and the best ways to highlight different things.
Are there other mediums that you use? I mean, newsletter, digital marketing, so like Facebook. I mean, I don't know if that's of interest to you at all, but paid, earned.
Yeah. TikTok. We are not on TikTok. Not sure if it's our audience.
Like, that's where you belong.
Yeah, but we also use LinkedIn, but it's almost exclusively for recruiting. So it's a completely different. We highlight our employees, and we talk about different things that are more like focused on the startup ecosystem than the restaurant ecosystem. Newsletters very much about like aggregating content and product updates. And yeah, we do paid advertising, and which is much more about like adding value and product and features that we have. So yeah, we use all of these different channels in different ways.
You were going to ask a question.
No, I was just going to say, it's like that meme that happened this weekend with Dolly Parton with the LinkedIn,
That was awesome.
Totally.
Facebook, Instagram, and, insert your dating app of choice. That part got very political. But yeah, thinking about how you can have one... well, I was listening to something that somebody was talking about yesterday, where they were saying, like, how many different ways can you do a cartwheel? Like, a cartwheel is still a cartwheel, but you can do it like a million different ways, and how do you make it always be a cartwheel? It's kind of the same thing when you're thinking about your brand. It's in so many different places, in many different ways, and how is it always the same thing?
But one thing about that is, I think that we are in an era where we're really thinking so much about communicating our brands that I think we're losing a little sight of the work. Just a little bit. I think there's a lot of, well, does this get hits? Does this do well? I can see, like, look at my Instagram, and there are numbers up and down and all around. And, I want to post about something I want to post about, not a ice cream cone that has sprinkles on it, which I know will get hits, or myself, which I know will get, So sometimes I waver, and that's where an outsider is helpful to say, well, this is, because it dilutes the work sometimes, I feel.
But I think that what you're also not saying is, Instagram is your communication tool, and not everybody works across all platforms, right? Like, you're not going to be on LinkedIn. It's not germane to your business. You're probably not going to be on TikTok, depending on what your purpose is.
Soon.
But, sometimes you just want to pick your best medium, or you want to pick, right? Eric, where do you guys live?
I would say, like, for me, I used to play music, and we missed the entire internet moment, right? And it was devastating to the band, because we had really great traction, and then as soon as everything went digital, there were like the bands that were amazing that completely missed it, and then everything just changed. And then I feel like, in terms of the way branding works digitally now, is that I would say that my restaurants have very high digital brand value, but it doesn't mean that I'm making money, right? So I would love to have a $3 million restaurant that's making $3 million a year, that has zero online presence, and that just functions on its own without having to think about those things, just like it was, just 10 years ago or so, where it was just like you can have a great restaurant in a great neighborhood and you didn't have to worry about anything except for the 50, 60 people that you were feeding every day. Because at the end of the day, if I have a huge digital brand value, I can't sell it. It's not really worth anything unless I want to build 20 of them. And that's not where I live, but that's what we spend so much time doing. So,
Or
it's
unless
kind of
potentially you wanted to do an like something in e-commerce, right? You could flip them because
So that's the.
but you don't want to do that.
That's the lazy.
Yeah.
I like, if you don't mind me commenting on this
Please.
idea of e-commerce, which I like. It sparked an idea of something that we do for our restaurants, is give them, the tools to be able to sell things that are very specific to restaurants, whether it's tickets or classes or merchandise, if they have a hot sauce or if they have a t-shirt or a guitar or whatever. We saw a lot of wellness items being sold recently. And what's really cool about that is it helps restaurants actually become like more lifestyle brands, which I think that you've perfected really well. And it kind of helps you have a relationship with the guest outside of just the four walls of the brick and mortar. And I think that's a really special opportunity and a really cool thing to be able to give to your customer base.
So, we could talk about the ways in which, brand, we're talking about the digital life of a brand, but also how it communicates in the real world. And Jen, you were talking about, you're pouring champagne and bringing your brand to life. Did anyone
I don't think
drink
we've
the
had
champagne?
any yet.
No. Here,
Cheers.
Sorry, be
Sorry,
jealous.
sorry, everyone. Where's your glass? Yeah. Down the hatch of the bottle.
No glasses.
No, I mean, I think brand is not only your digital assets, but it's really like it. When I think about brand,
isn't, but just in the case of amplifying. But anyway, yeah.
When I think of brand, I think about what are the things that people say about you or your company, like what, and.
Wait, I have to interrupt you. Jeff Bezos, the quote. Does everyone know the quote? Brand is what people say about you when you're on the rim.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really true. One of the things that I think a lot about is how can you be the first, the best, or the only at something? I have a PR company as well, and that's what we talk to all of our clients about, as they're sort of defining what their mission is and who they're going to be, what they want to be known for. Like, I think there's great power in saying, I want to be the best German bakery in, on X Street, or I want to be the best champagne bar in the world, or I want to be, having some superlative is very editorial, it's very interesting, and it also is like really remarkable and memorable for people who are interacting with your brand. It's also extremely powerful for your team. I think one of the greatest extension points of who you are as a brand is everybody on your team and how they communicate your vision to your customers. So sometimes that comes through, in the four walls of your space. Sometimes those are through digital assets that you're creating and that you own. Sometimes that's through your team, but also a lot of it is through the way that people are talking about and interacting with your brand. So if we're talking about social, the things that people are putting up on their own channels about you, your company, your brand, being in your space, talking about or bragging about how they got access to something within your brand. And it's not only what you put out there, but truly what people say about you.
And how do you make sure what they say about you is what you want them to say?
Well, I think you can create really easy moments for them to interact with your brand. For us, we have all sorts of visual touch points throughout the restaurants that are really easy for people to capture. So, for example, our tables have our tagline, which says, "Hello, old friend." They're these beautiful cafe tables, and like everyone, they're white tables with little black writing, and everybody can take a really great photo from overhead. And so it's got our literal brand and then sort of the tagline of our brand. In the bathroom in New York, we have one of those like emergency, in case of emergency, break glass things, but instead of a fire hydrant or an axe, it is a bottle of Krug, like a massive bottle of Krug. So like that's really easy to take photos of. And that doesn't actually have our literal brand on it, but we see it across Instagram constantly. And we do other fun things.
What about your reserved?
Yeah. Our reserve signs say like reserved for Michelle Obama or reserved for Oprah or reserved for RGB. And none of them have come in yet, but they always have seats reserved for them.
And you'll see on Instagram when you see the reserved, like the comments are like, oh my God, was she really there?
Oh,
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
a particularly excellent visual opportunity.
Yeah, it's just a fun thing. I mean, I think for us, we realize that champagne is a very intimidating subject. It's an intimidating price point. It's confusing to understand. So we're always thinking about the touch points between high and low. So the idea that you can drink $150 champagne with a burger, or in San Francisco, our main item that we have are tater tot waffles. So we take tater tots and we put them in a waffle iron, but then we put like caviar or smoked salmon or truffles on top. So people understanding that there's like a sense of humor to our brand is something that's really important. But I think regularly, as we add new dishes to the menu, like how is this going to translate to the guest? Is it going to be memorable? Is it going to play? And we want everything to be extremely delicious and to provide value. But I do think of almost every choice that we make through the lens of brand. Like, is this a specifically remarkably Riddler-oriented thing?
But I think that's sort of how we have to think now, because I joined Instagram and was like, I'm getting a bikini wax. This is the view. Seriously, I really did. And people said to me, you need to put your photography up there. And I said, I have a fabulous website. Please, everybody, go to my website. It's beautiful. I really, and you know, it is true. You do, and I do. I mean, I make a joke, but I think I'm constantly surprised if I put an old picture of Kanye West or whatever, and I tell the story. People want to hear the story. And everybody in this room has a camera, and everyone will take a picture, and they'll probably be pretty damn good. And you do have to sort of figure out, in the changing world, how are you unique? How do you stick out?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was talking to Ben Leventhal, founder of Eater, now founder of Resi, the other day. And I was like, how have you seen restaurants change? And he was saying, the biggest thing is that people no longer just want to go to the big, splashy restaurant. They want to go to the restaurant where they understand and they know who the owner or the founder or the chef is. And they follow that person. They know what that person was doing on their day off. They know how many kids they have. They know where their house, like they know all of the stuff about the person.
Stalker.
And I think it puts us as operators in a really weird place.
So let's hear what you have to say about that, Erik.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you. That's you.
I got here a little bit early, and I just had a baby that's like 2 weeks old, and I was like, I need a haircut, and then I was like, I'm gonna go get a haircut, but Sherry would have killed me if I was late, and then I was like, I'm gonna come to this panel without a hat, and then that would have been part of my personal brand. Is I'd probably even wear this hat to bed. It's like my comfort blanket. And then no one would recognize me. But no, I think, like, yes, it's very true. And I've had a lot of ups and downs in my career, and people have followed them and are very in touch with it. It's very personable, and sometimes it's a bit too much. But at the same time, like, it's been a wonderful journey. So I don't really know. That's why I said the big question is does it have to continue to be an extension of me, or will it long-term have its own life?
How does it feel? Like, what type of choices do you make in terms of what you share and what you don't share?
I have a lot of opinions about things that I feel like I don't want to be the person to spearhead a particular conversation or represent a certain issue, because there's others that are more eloquent at it than I am, even though I have very strong feelings, because that's not really what my brand is. My brand is more about creating a space where people can have those conversations, but not be the person that is leading or has an opinion about it, whether I have one or not. And I feel like people do at this point, we're like, well, what do you think about wage equality or this or that? And I'm like, I have feelings about it, but because of my personal past experience, I don't really want to be in that bubble.
And what's the personal past experience?
So my first restaurant was Toki Underground, where we met, and
Yeah.
Dana gave me my first national write-up in food and wine back in 2011. And it was amazing. I remember going to her office, and it was just probably talked as poorly as I am now, but
You're doing great.
I ended up losing the restaurant, and I ended up getting sued, it was like the cover of the style section of the Washington Post. They dragged my wife into it. It took 4 years to resolve. We lost our health insurance with our first child. And this was when I was like very much like doing all the events, doing this and doing that. And since then, I think I've been like the guy that's very accessible, but very unapproachable, but still super nice. And I kind of like to stay in that realm.
That's a hard matrix actually, to be accessible, but don't talk to me. So this brings up everything we're talking about really comes back to perhaps the most critical question in voice, in brand, which is voice. You know, what do you sound like? What do you cover? What do you look like? Because that's what, like you were talking about, all the ways in which you're different across different mediums, but actually there's ways in which you're completely the same, and the thing that's the same, one would imagine, is how you sound and perhaps how you look, not the content, like one's educational and one's more community. But how do any of you think about like the origin of the tone and the visual setting of the brand? Because from there, you become invincible, right? You become separated from your competition because you don't look like them or sound like them, and you really set yourself apart.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, Jen and I were talking about this last night, and tone of voice is a really hard one, and especially the way, we have so many different employees that are representing us, and we have so many different restaurants that we're representing. So I find tone of voice to be a harder one. So I'm just going to the one that I find easier based on like what our experience is the visual.
Wait, no, that's just so interesting. Like, why is the voice that hard? And then who has the answer to the voice problem?
I think it's hard because there's so many variables from whoever is executing the voice. So let's say you have, in your case, how many employees? 180, something like that?
120.
120, and 40 of them are consumer facing? I don't know.
More.
Okay.
More, like
so
at least
everybody
half.
on your support team has to respond to questions from the public constantly. And so you can give them a list of say this, don't say this, say this, don't say this, but you also want to give them agency to make their own decisions, and they have their own personalities, which you want to give them a little bit of freedom there. So it's really hard to like construct how they're going to interact with the world.
But you still need it, right? You need to know whether they're like funny or they're serious,
Right.
or they're like, because you need to have a consistent experience.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that we lean on is one thing that a customer once said before we ever did our like mission, vision, and pillars was that BentoBox treats us the way that we treat our guests, and that's something that we always come back to and how we interact, and I guess that kind of pours into the tone of voice. But like Jen said, you don't want to give people a script of how you talk, because that canned vibe is like very obvious and very inauthentic, and be authentic is actually one of our principles. So, but with the visual side, I think we've got a good
Okay, let's go on the
thing,
visual
right?
side.
It's very simple. It's just having like brand colors and fonts.
But it's not necessarily simple to everybody. So, brand colors. What'd you choose?
Exactly, font. What did we choose?
Yeah.
Well, we have this palette of these different grays and kind of these orange, like orangey reds, and we give each one of the colors like a name that kind of it goes back to our brand. So we have tomato is one of our main colors, soy is another one of our colors, sparkling water, and so it all kind of connects. They're like little details, but it all ties in together that we work with the hospitality industry and
But the details are really important, particularly when you have a lot of employees who need to understand the brand. Like every touch point that you have with your team allows them to understand the brand better and then represent it better.
Yeah, and I really related to what you said. What was it? Accessible, but don't how did you? Whatever.
I don't know.
It was like accessible.
We can rewind the tape.
Accessible, but don't something like don't talk. And I feel like I really relate to that. And the way that I've really solved that is put a lot of the brand on our team and have them really embody it and represent it, because I feel I really relate to you. I'm like a very understated and reluctant type of leader in some way. And so the one thing that we do is we have like our culture awards where everyone wins. Twice a year we do like sashes where someone wins one of the principles, and it's a great way to kind of like put the responsibility on the team rather than it always having to come from me, because I would be miserable if I had that responsibility.
It's also, it's a leadership principle as much as that's a brand principle. A principle of leadership being don't have it all be about you. It's really all about your team.
Yeah, I also wear two hats, right? I have my own business, and then in July I started as the executive chef of Am Pizza, which is a big regional pizza chain here, which is very like, this is our brand, these are our pillars, here are the socks, and et cetera, et cetera. And that was, for me, I took that job because I was looking for professional inspiration, essentially. Like every day, everyone looks to me for the answers. I've been doing that for so long. I was just kind of craving a chance to be a part of a team that's solving a problem instead of being the person that's supposed to solve all of the problems. But one of the things, I came and I lived in New York for 2 months, and it was really great. Opened the Wall Street store, and their brand is very black and white. And the ampersand represents the people and their vision for how they treat people and the product, and it's just so impressive. But I was like, this only will last in your suburban markets. In the suburbs, this vision will last 10, 15, 20 years, and it will always be interesting. But in New York, this isn't going to work. In New York, or if you go to Chicago, or you go to these other cities, where you don't have that same connection of being this regional, and you're translating it out as this brand is so visually strong and so in the box that it's going to end up killing you.
I think what you're saying maybe is that when the brand is that strong and it's timely, like they're black and white, and the boldness of it is a moment. In the suburbs, the moment lasts longer, but when you're that heavily branded, you can be it can be done. It's like, well, there's a new pizza concept that's so much more fun. So that's actually like a fascinating brand challenge, right? How do you build a brand to be flexible?
Yeah, and then it's for them. My challenge was them as like, you want to have an executive chef for craft your own pizza, but craft your own pizza, so many limitations because of like how much each ingredient needs to charge. So you can what we call casseroles. So you can build yourself a pizza casserole and still function, and then. But if you don't want to change and expand out of the walls you've already created, you're always going to be limited. So it's okay to change your font, even though it feels so gut-wrenching. It's okay to add a color. It's okay to, do this. And the markets that are tougher, where you have to be more competitive, will find that you care more about being in the market that they are because you've chosen to adapt, and you've chosen to make it more neighborly.
I think it's such a fascinating thing, because a lot of brand preaching is like, okay, when you build a brand, everything has to match, right? Like every font has to match, whether it's signage or collateral or website. Every color has to match. But when you go to huge brands like Amazon, they don't match at all. And like that was my first experience of, oh my God, they actually, all the different sites within Amazon, it's like as a designer focused person, they're a mess. And so I went to Dig Food Group and work with them, and we have a bunch of iterations out in the marketplace. And at first I was like, this is painful to me to see some flags that say Dig In, it's the old name, some flags that say Dig New Font, period, some that say Dig No Period, some that are old colors, some that are black, some that are new font, and like it makes my heart race. But what I have learned over time is to like loosen up, because in fact at the core of Dig are a couple of principles which are about supply and training and the food and the experience that you get, and that actually overreaches brand and this obsessive attention to color and font, and I think makes it. I like to think about Dig as like bamboo, like it's really flexible, and the brand. It's flexible because of the pillars. Like you have, there's a bunch of pillars that make it so that we can do almost anything, and we don't have to be tied.
But you always know when you're in a Dig or a Dig-In store, right? I'm not allowed to call it Dig-In anymore?
You're not.
Sorry, I didn't know that. But you always know when you're in one of those spots, which is remarkable, even if there's a lot of differences between it. So there must be core elements of those restaurants that we're recognizing.
That's right, because we're recognizing the food experience, the experience, and the quality. But there were old versions, that still had wood. We don't do any, of a particular type. We don't do that anymore. And I was just fascinated that the brand, the promise was so strong. So working on the promise is incredibly important.
Well, and now you have 232.
We have 232 Bleecker.
Which
doesn't
even have the name.
No, so 232 Bleecker is a restaurant on Bleecker Street with Suzanne Cups as the chef. And so instead of being like a farm fast concept, it's a beautiful sit-down restaurant. Again, we have the liberty to do it because of the pillars. And it doesn't have anything to do with the visual brand identity is completely different.
But I think one needs the flexibility, because I used to have a staff, and they would say, why don't you do one black and white picture and one color picture? And then why don't you do all blues and all pinks? And literally, I was shriveled down to the tiniest thing because I couldn't fit the content that I wanted to share within that. So color, those are all great ideas. Color, tone, if it's National Pizza Day or whatever, but you've got to take those into consideration, but you also have to listen to, if you can, what your message is, because that's what it comes down to.
Right, well that's, what it is, and then that is translating into voice. Right. That's why it's so hard, right? Because you're trying to translate something that is a feeling into a color and a font, and then from the feeling to the color, the font, and then to like something that everybody can share, and that becomes a community that links you, because at the end of the day, the reason people are going to be talking about you behind your back is because the brand has meaning in a community. So can we talk about the notion of community and how you build community online and offline?
I can go.
Champagne.
Community, I would say, is like the most important foundation of everything that we do at the Riddler. And it's been really interesting to see, we opened our first location in San Francisco, and now we have one here in New York. And I've been blown away by how many guests we've received at the New York location who are visiting from San Francisco and just want to come see what it's like in New York. Which blows my mind that if you're on vacation for 3 days from San Francisco, you're going to go to the same place you can get back home. But there's something to that.
But it's also totally different here.
It is quite different. I think when I think about brand, I also think about how do you make it site specific or community specific. And for us, we've got key touch points that are consistent across the brand. A lot of black lacquer, a lot of white marble, a lot of brass, a lot of vintage pieces, obviously a big champagne list, but then we also have a huge community. And the best way that we interact with our community is we have this club called the 100 Club, which if you join the 100 Club, we'll track all the champagnes that you drink. And if you get to 100 bottles, you get a bomber jacket with your name embroidered in gold. So, and it's basically our loyalty program without telling people that it's a loyalty program. And people love it. And you get a VIP note in Resi. So even if you're at 2 bottles on your 100 Club journey, you get priority seating. We take extra good care of you. We just know that you want to come back, basically. And obviously we want as many people to come back as possibly can. And then for the people who do get to the 100, it's like a major celebration. It's a really big deal. So that's one key way that we work with our community. We also use our Resi platform in a really robust way with all kinds of guest codes and notes. Almost everybody on our team came from fine dining, so we're all really used to this idea of putting in all of our VIPs into the system and making sure that we know when they're coming to visit us and that we take care of them, but then also any new guests who come who have a keen interest in what we're doing, we make sure that we take as many notes about them as we possibly can, and we share that database between San Francisco and New York. And press is a part of our community. It's a really important way for us to reach as many people as we possibly can, whether it's in the cities that we're operating in or in lots of cities beyond. And the most important community we have is our talent, everybody who works on the two teams. And we really believe in promoting from within. So we have a woman who just got promoted to director of operations of both locations. She started as a sommelier on our team, and then head som, and then AGM, and then GM, and now she's running both locations. So, your community is first and foremost, or your team is first and foremost the greatest community that you have, because those are the people who are running the business day to day.
I'm curious, Erik, you were talking about the communities that you're in and how you were part of the fabric and what happens when you move outside of those communities. Can you tell us about the evolution? You're in places that other people wouldn't open.
Yeah, so I moved to DC 2007 in H.Street corridor. The H.Street corridor was running from 4th Street Northeast to 14th Street Northeast, and used to be, if you've been, it basically was the Georgetown of Washington, D.C. in the 60s, and it all burned down in 1968 during the Martin Luther King riot. The city cut off the bridge, and it kind of became an isolated neighborhood. I have 3 businesses in that neighborhood, and have lived there for the last 13 years. And Maketto, which was our most ambitious project, was this mixed concept space, retail, cafe, restaurant, inspired by Taiwanese Cambodian night markets, but also high-end men's fashion. Our thinking was, during the 60s, if you were going to go buy your prom dress, you were going to get a haircut, you were going to get your first suit, you were going to go out on a dinner date, you would have gone to H Street, and it was this place that was just beautiful and vibrant, and we wanted to create something that would connect to the history, and then we would put this really fancy retail store in the front. And it's one of those things when you talk about verbally, sounds really confusing, it was really hard to sell, it was really hard to get investors for, and it was very important for us to create this digital brand and life that now when you see the pictures, it's like, oh, this makes sense, and this happens. We opened about 6 years ago, and now you see multiple places start doing it. You got Kith and Treats, you got bars in Bloomingdale's, and you have Urban Outfitters buying pizza concepts. But we were definitely the first 6 years ago to really do it at a level where you would get a James Beard nomination or a Michelin. You would also be recognized on Hypebeast or any of these fashion blogs. But our digital store experience is very different than our in-shop experience. If you're looking at online, you're going to see a $600 pair of Y3s, a $900 pair of Hender schemes next to our own wine that we've made with our own label, our own beer, and it's just very clean and modern and what people want from when they're scrolling through their Instagram. But then you come to the store on a Sunday, it might be pumpkin carving day and 50 strollers and hundreds of kids running around carving pumpkins, and you might be the internet head who came down from New York and heard about this store, and you're just like, this is not what I saw. And for us, we might just buy one pair of those shoes because there'll be some brand, maybe like BentoBox or BMW or Audi, who are looking to do an experience. American Express is a great partner where they're looking to give their cardholders a new experience in an urban setting of something they've never seen. And we maintain that image on the internet for that specific reason. And then we make sure that the restaurant itself is whatever it needs to be for the people that are coming to it, and it will evolve to adapt to that.
We have a minute left, and so I just want to do a speed round of what you've seen people do really wrong in the world of brand. Like, where have people crashed and burned?
I'm not going that speedy. Honestly, I'm going to go back to the original thing that I said around is trying to channel absolutely everything into one place, and so you don't get anything out of it, really. And I think one good example of this, and I'm just going to go back to websites, is when you try to do like music and video and like wanted to, conjure up like everything about the entire restaurant in this one web page, and it just like you almost ended up like turning people away. And so when I think about all the different channels again, trying to just be very deliberate and considerate about everything that happens, and not feeling like brand has to just be like this vomit of everything.
Okay. Jen.
I think the biggest mistake is just not investing in brand at all. So not having a clear vision, and then not getting a cool graphic designer, not putting anything on Instagram, having ugly menus, having an ugly space. Like, you see a lot of really talented people who create restaurants that are not particularly remarkable because of that. And it does cost money to invest in these things up front, but I think it's worth every penny.
Not understanding the trade, so not being classically trained, not taking a minute to understand actually what you're doing and spending the time. So the word photography, photographers banded around everywhere. Everyone's a photographer now, but are they really?
I think just be as honest and upfront as possible, and just set your boundaries early. If you don't do that, you're just kind of running around with the chicken with your head cut off.
Okay, with that, branding. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tina.